Hello, and welcome to Soul Aligned CEO Podcast, the show that shares the stories of entrepreneurs from all around the world who have started businesses and they are doing that soul aligned. I'm your host, Jenny Mori, and I am really excited that in today's episode, I am going to share with you my journey of how I started this podcast, and I did it in 30 days. Now, I'm going to break this down over 2 episodes for you, just so that it's a little bit easier to digest. So, in this first episode, I am going to go over all of the creative and artistic and people aspects of setting up a podcast. So, things like how do you come up with your topic and the show format, podcast art, and music considerations. And then the components of if you have a guest on your podcast, organizing and preparing for that. So that'll be part one. And then in part two, I'll take you through all the functional and kind of technical aspects of starting a podcast. So that will be things like equipment, software for editing and recording, also the actual recording of the episodes, and then publishing and submitting your podcast. So, welcome. I'm really excited to have you here, and I hope that this will be an informative series. So I know that there are so many ways to get information about podcasts these days. You can Google it, you can watch a variety of videos, but I really felt like it might be interesting to actually hear real time from someone who actually just went through the steps and started a podcast. So that's what I wanted to do today. So, the first thing when you're thinking about starting a podcast is what are you going to talk about? So, the topic. So, the way that I look at the topic is it needs to be something that you are either really passionate about or it's something that you have a lot of information about and a lot of interest in to be able to share that with the world. So, when you're thinking about something that you're going to want to talk about, can you talk about it for 15, 20, 30 minutes and have enough content and ideas to keep an episode interesting? If you plan to have guests on your show, is there enough interest and passion to really dig deep and learn about their story and what they have to share about the particular topic? So for me, the whole soul aligned CEO concept may have seemed like it came out of nowhere for many of you that know me, but actually it's been something that's been in the back of my head for several years now. I have been an entrepreneur for almost 20 years. And I have owned and run businesses in a variety of different industries. And one thing that's always been important to me is that what I'm doing is aligned. So feels right in my body, in my mind, and also in my spirit. So that's the whole concept of being completely soul aligned. So as I have gone through setting up and establishing my own businesses, that's always been in the back of my head. How does this feel? What kind of energy does this type of work bring to me and to the world? And so, as I've kind of pursued different things, I've really started to realize that that's what matters most. So this summer, I had the opportunity to participate in a masterclass that was led by Danielle Page, and she brought together different entrepreneurs from all around the world who have either started businesses or were thinking about starting businesses. And she shared different tips and online strategies, and it was a really incredible course. And through this course, I got the opportunity to meet these other entrepreneurs. And it occurred to me, I could really shed a light on all of these different stories. And it's something that the world would really benefit from hearing. And so that's how the concept of soul aligned CEO came to be. And it's a topic that I'm very passionate about because I've lived it. I've lived it for almost 2 decades now. So I know myself the ins and outs and, the challenges and the exciting things about being an entrepreneur. And so it's so interesting to me to speak with other entrepreneurs who are on a similar journey and find out what they have learned and really share that information to inspire potential new entrepreneurs. So that's how I came up with my topic. And so when you're thinking about it, it really should be something that you're passionate about, whether it's a hobby or a professional interest or just a topic that you share a lot of information and opinions on. You want to just make sure that you're going to have fun and it's going to be interesting for you. So, after you decide on a topic, I think the next thing to really think about is how is your show going to be set up? Or how will it flow? Or how do you want it to be organized? So, to give you some examples, you can do different types of show formats. So, for instance, like this episode, it's just me. It's a solo podcast, and I'm talking to you. Other types of podcasts are kind of co host podcasts where you have multiple people who are all sharing opinions and you have a dialogue about a certain topic. Another type of format is a interview format, which is the other type that I have really chosen to do with this podcast, is where you bring on a featured guest who either has a particular topic to share or something that they're working on that they'd like to discuss. And then that's a back and forth conversation with that person. And then the other type of podcast is like a storytelling podcast. So if you have an information or journey or something that you'd like to share, but more in an anecdotal story format, that's another type of episode that I have seen. So you want to kind of decide on the format because that's going to help you just organize the overall show. Once you have a topic in mind, like let's say you want to talk about the different techniques of learning how to play a guitar, for example, you want to be able to, lay out what you want to talk about. Is it just you? Are you bringing on experts? Are you interviewing someone that's teaching guitar lessons? And so those are all things to think about in the early stages of setting up a podcast. Now, of course, this could all change. And as I move through and practice and create new episodes, I might adjust the format of this show. So you have the creative freedom to do that. But it's a good idea to just have something laid out to start with. So, after you have your topic and kind of a general understanding of how you want your episodes to flow and be organized, the next things that I would suggest considering are some of the artistic aspects. So, the first is the podcast cover art. Now, many people have asked me, did I create the podcast cover art? And I am very flattered, but no, I am not artistic enough in any way to create a podcast cover art. So I actually outsourced that. And, there's a lot of different ways to create a podcast cover art. For me, it was really important that it be professional and crisp and designed in a way that would be eye catching. So I used a platform called 99 Designs, and I can't say enough about this platform. It was so easy to use. I got exactly what I wanted and at a really affordable price. And so the way the process works with 99 Designs is you submit what you would like created in a proposal. And so for me, I put together the proposal for the podcast cover art. I needed it to be specific, size and qualifications. I had certain color schemes that I wanted to use. And then I had some inspirational photos that I knew I wanted to be a part of the cover art. So I made my proposal, and then various graphic artists submitted draft designs. And so through that process, I got to go through and review designs, work with some of the graphic artists to see if there were updates that would work, and then finally decide on a final art design, which is what you see when you go to Spotify or Apple Podcasts, the cover art. So, again, you could create this on your own if you are creative. You could use apps like Canva. They have settings for you to be able to create a podcast cover art. So, again, that's totally up to you, whatever your comfort level is. But if you do need something created, I highly recommend 99 Designs, and I will definitely be going back there to get any further artwork that I need done. It was just a really seamless and easy and fun process. So, after you think about the cover art, the other thing that you want to consider is music. Now, I know a lot of people have music intros and outros on their podcast, and you may have noticed that for my episodes so far, I have decided not to do that. So, there are some considerations with music that you need to be aware of. The first is copyright. So, you can't just use anybody's music and throw it up there as an intro to your podcast. So, you need to do some research and understand the types of platforms that offer music available, that you can pay for and that you can have the rights to use on your podcast. Now, I actually do have some music that I produced that I am considering using for my podcast intro. But for now, I've decided to just keep it really simple, and dive right into the episodes since these are all pretty new. So, again, you just want to be aware of copyright and that you need to be finding music that you can legally use and that you can pay for to have to be on your podcast. So, after you do the art and the music and you have your topic and your format all situated, the last thing that I would suggest doing before diving into the more technical and functional pieces is if you are going to have guests on your show, and whether that's co-hosts or guests that you're interviewing, there is some preparation involved when you are going to have other people, because you can just wake up one morning and feel inspired and hop on your computer and record an episode. But if you are going to be involving other people, especially guests, it's going to take a little bit of coordination. And so, what I have discovered over this last month that works really well is to have pre meetings. So, about a week before we would record the actual episode, I meet with the guest and kind of talk with them about the types of questions, make sure they feel comfortable. Not so much to have the podcast scripted per se, but more so to just make sure that they feel comfortable and they have a familiarity of the types of things that I would like to ask so that they feel good about answering the questions when we do record the podcast. And then we do other things like check their lighting and check their sound and make sure that their background is going to look okay. Because in this day and age, with everybody at home, you want to just make sure that the setup is going to be good. And so I run through some of those preliminary things the week before that we're going to do the podcast. Then I'll put together a brief show notes and kind of outline so that the guest has it to review, and just let them know that it's going to be a lot of fun, that it's going to be a conversation, and we'll hop into the studio and start recording. So, those are really the first four steps that I went through when starting a podcast. And again, I wanted to keep this part one mostly about the more kind of creative and people aspects of setting up a podcast. So, just to recap again, so first, you're going to want to come up with your topic. What are you going to talk about? What are you passionate about and you want to share with the world? And then after you come up with that topic, I would spend some time thinking about the type of podcast or the format that you want your podcast to be, whether it's a solo cast, co-host, interview style, telling a story, just so that you can get yourself in the mind frame of how is the podcast going to be set up and how is it going to flow. Then, once you feel pretty good about those two things, I would tackle the podcast art because you're going to want a podcast cover art, whether you create it or you have a graphic artist work with you to create it. And then the music, again, you want to just have some thought go into any music that you're going to be using to make sure that the copyright that you are able to use it. And then finally, it's preparing for the episode. And especially if you have any guests, doing that pre meeting, I have found is so, so helpful. So, this is part one. So, I'm going to end this here. And I look forward to sharing with you in part two the more technical and kind of operational aspects that I went through in 30 days to start this podcast. Thanks for listening.